Today's webinar is about embedding sustainable considerations into procurement. And then, of course, I will also touch on the very, very important concept that is social value, how the two tie in. And I'm going to keep the chat box open, but I'm going to keep it on my other screen for today. A couple of house rules before I introduce myself. So you will see on your screen a Q&A box. That's for questions and answers. Feel free to pop in your questions throughout the session. I will take all the questions at the end and respond to all of them as much as possible. Yes, you will get a copy of the slides. If you wish to take notes, that's all right. If not, you will get the notes and the slides in a PDF version. And towards the end, we appreciate if you could share your feedback with us. We are always looking to better our content and our presentations that we host for you. The agenda for today, so setting the scene, defining what is sustainability, what is sustainable procurement, what does it mean? And then drawing upon the framework of the official standard, which is ISO 2400, and the clauses talking about what are the fundamentals and the considerations at the start of your sustainable procurement journey. What should your policy and strategy look like? How can you strengthen that element? What are your enablers or helpers for your procurement process to ensure it's neatly embedded through the process? And finally, the considerations in the procurement process, which is plan, source, and manage. Introduction. So I'm Melita De Silva. I work for Action Sustainability and the Supply Chain Sustainability School. I've got about 18 years experience in procurement, supply chain management, social value, and sustainability. And I'm your host and presenter for today. Learning outcomes, you will be able to define what sustainable procurement is, what's its importance to your organization, understand the various drivers for embarking on that sustainability journey. Now, the drivers will be very, very different for each organization, so I'll take you through what those key ones are. Then we'll move on to the standards, so I'll give you an outline of ISO 2400 and how you can use that as a framework to embed sustainability into procurement again. We'll also go through some tools at a very high level used to drive your sustainable procurement approach. So starting with sustainable procurement, I have a little video for you here that talks about the triple bottom line and why sustainability is important and what it is to begin with. Hopefully this works.
The concept of sustainability first appeared in the Brundtland Report, published in 1987. This document, which was also referred to as Our Common Future, was elaborated for the United Nations in order to warn about the negative environmental consequences of economic development and globalization. It was written with the aim of offering solutions to the problems arising from industrialization and population growth. Today, sustainability tries to secure present needs without compromising future generations. How? Without giving up any of the three essential pillars: environmental protection, social development, and economic growth. Sustainability is concerned with assuming that nature and the environment are not an inexhaustible resource, and so it is necessary to protect them and use them rationally. Sustainability promotes social development, seeking cohesion between communities and cultures to achieve satisfactory levels in quality of life, health, and education. Thirdly, sustainability focuses on equal economic growth that generates wealth for all without harming the environment. Nowadays, many of the challenges that humans face, such as climate change or water scarcity, can only be tackled from a global perspective and by promoting sustainable development. Now that you know what sustainability is, remember to act in the present, thinking about the future.
So quite an important concept there that was presented on the video, and that's that triple bottom line effect. So people, planet, and profit. Here on the slide, we're talking about, again, so environmental, social, and economic. That forms the whole area of sustainability. The environmental aspect is something that we all comprehend, we understand very easily. It's easy to identify and observe. So things like carbon emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, preventing pollution, managing environment, natural resources, increasing biodiversity. So that is something that's top of everyone's agenda, whether it's net zero, 2030, 2040, 2050, whatever that may be. It's the social and the economic aspect that usually gets ignored because it's not that easy to grasp or comprehend, but also because the environmental aspect is so important, and rightly so, that not a lot of importance may be given to the social and the economic aspect. The economic aspects, look at the words on the screen: profit, cost saving. Profitability is something that we get very easily, but when thinking about profitability, it's not just about your organization, especially if you're a buying organization, but thinking about the procurement process, the negotiation in the procurement process, and the profitability of your supply chain as well. That would mean getting added value benefits through the tender process without squeezing the bottom line price of your supplier, as an example. Cost saving by using less resources, wasting less, using less energy can also add to cost savings and the bottom line. Social education, think about things like engaging with local schools, colleges, STEM activities, science, technology, engineering, math. Community engagement and investment. Equal opportunity, not just thinking about diversity within your own workforce, but equal opportunity and diversity within your supply chain as well. It's important to think triple bottom line, because if we forget any one of these spheres or two of them, then your three-pillar agenda will fall flat on its face. Your sustainability decisions can become very, very quickly unsustainable. You might concentrate on one area, but create adverse effects on the other areas. So always looking at the whole picture and thinking triple bottom line at every step of the way. Very, very quick definition of sustainable procurement is procurement that has a positive environmental, social, economic impact on a whole life basis. Positive being proactive, so recognizing by carrying out procurement activity, there may probably be negative impacts on people, planet, profit, carrying out that due diligence, thinking in an ethical manner, embedding your sustainability considerations right from the start rather than being reactive. So proactive versus being reactive. Very, very few and quick guidelines about the standards. So 2400 is the guidance standard on sustainable procurement. Guidance, not a requirement standard, so you will get a score for your organization on 0 to 5, depending on where you are on your sustainability journey. We do not issue a certificate. The standard gives you an understanding of what sustainable procurement is, what are the impacts and things you need to consider in your procurement process or your policy, your strategy, and how to practically implement sustainable procurement. It does not just apply to large organizations, but the standard applies to a company irrespective of your size, geographical location, industry, or sector that you operate in. And the most important thing to remember as a procurement professional, sustainability does not sit just on our shoulders, but every stakeholder who gets involved in the process: budget holder, budget allocator, QA, QC department, health and safety, environmental sustainability teams, HR, IT, whoever gets involved in the procurement process. Everyone needs to have a think about sustainability considerations feeding into procurement. So the standard is made up of 4 main clauses, but I'll take you through that in a lot more detail on the further slides. It starts with the fundamentals. So why are you going on this journey? What's driving you as an organization? What are your principles? Are you thinking about being transparent and accountable for your procurement decisions? Are you thinking about things like human rights, modern slavery, the environment, community benefits as well? Those fundamental decisions help to then shape your policy and your strategy, which will need your leadership support, and accountability and responsibilities are allocated for who will implement that policy and strategy, who carries out the work on the ground. From the policy and strategy, you start to shape your procurement process, but in between the two, you'll have some helpers or enablers already within the procurement process that will help to make that a smooth journey. Your governance documents, your priority setting, red, amber, green. Again, I will explain these in a lot more detail on the slides to come. your stakeholders, your people within your teams, and finally embedding it into the procurement process, plan, source, and manage. I've got a little video here for you because I often get asked the question, why do we need a separate sustainable procurement policy when we've got at the organization level a CSR policy? What's at the group or the organization level is overarching overall, but for the sustainability to feed into procurement, you will need that sustainable procurement policy because that's an internal and an external facing document for the supply chain as well. The video gives you a link of your corporate policy, the procurement department level policy, and the procurement process, how they link into each other and how the chain feeds back again from the beginning. So just another tiny video here for you.
Keeping the world livable for the generations to come. This is where procurement plays an essential role. ISO 2400 is the right way to do it. These international guidelines give organizations sustainable procurement policies, structure and insight. After the corporate sustainability policy has been established, it will be incorporated into procurement policy and strategy. Procurement will consider stakeholder needs, risks and priorities. It will factor in measurement of impact and achievement and will consider staff training requirements. These preconditions help purchasers, contract managers and budgetary controllers embed sustainability in the procurement process. Think of the inclusion of social and environmental criteria, the choice for sustainable and innovative suppliers, the striving for circular procurement, and the agreement on codes of conduct. All these sustainability actions are continuously being monitored and improved. The results are then fed back to management and other stakeholders. The ISO 2400 guideline will support you and your organization when taking the steps required to keep procuring and doing business in a future-proof way. Start working.
So if you see from the video, that's what I talked about, having a corporate level goal, that then feeds down into your procurement level or procurement department level policy and into the process. I will touch on that again further in the slides, but now we're going to talk about the fundamentals. So you're starting out in your sustainable procurement journey. What's going to shape that? What are your organization's most important objectives or goals or targets that they want to achieve? So how will you go about doing that? A couple of points to remember. So you're thinking about managing the risk. Now, whatever that may mean in your world, whether it's carbon emissions or reducing things like waste, single-use plastics, you want to engage in more community activities. How will you manage those risks and opportunities? So it starts with identifying what those are, prioritizing them in terms of red, amber, green, red being an absolute risk. If it occurs and the effects are disastrous, you cannot put that on the back burner. That needs to be managed now. And that's what you will do in terms of managing the risk. So identify, prioritize, what do I need to deal with now? If it's amber, I can park it for maybe 3 months, and then think about what do I need to do to manage those risks. Due diligence, so acknowledging that by the procurement process, we're probably having adverse effects on triple bottom line, people, planet, and profit. But then also acknowledging that, yes, we can address those negative sustainability impacts, and how are we going to go about doing it? So not just due diligence in the process, but acting in an ethical manner, acknowledging those adverse impacts, being transparent about your decision and the impacts that it's having as well. Priorities is related to managing the risk. So you've identified and prioritized what you need to deal with. One size does not fit all. So every supplier on a tender list or on a works package is not going to bring on the same amount of risk and opportunity. Similarly, every works package is not going to bring on the same risk and opportunity in terms of sustainability. Usually, I've seen organizations concentrating on the top 10, top 20 spend, your large, your key, your strategic partners that have those higher value contracts, longer duration contracts that you deal with day in and day out. So especially your bottleneck single source suppliers as well. So you've set your priorities, you will not be able to manage all of your supply chain. You probably do not need to ask sustainability questions of every single member in your supply chain. Avoiding complicity. So this is quite an interesting one. If you're aware of something unsustainable and unethical happening in your supply chain and you do one of two things or both, you keep quiet about it or you are hand in hand in it. When the truth comes to light and the investigation happens, you will be part of that investigation and it will create an issue for you as well because you were aware of it, you did not raise the issue, or you were engaging as well in wrongful acts. So being always clear that you're ethical and transparent in your process and not being hand in hand with those unethical situations. Exercising influence. Procurement professionals, by the very nature of the day job that we carry out, every day, every week, every month, we're always in touch with the supply chain through plan, source, manage of the procurement activity. So we've got that talk time, that leverage with the suppliers to influence the behavior of your suppliers through the procurement process. Ask them the question, these are our organizational goals, whether it's net zero carbon or engaging in more volunteering activities or thinking about profitability down the tiers. Where are you, Mr. or Mrs. Supplier, on your sustainability journey? Have you just developed a policy? Are you developing a sustainable procurement plan? What does your organization's sustainability culture look like? So trying and influencing your supply chain as well. I talked about drivers being really, really important to shape your policy. There's a lot of text here on the screen. Like I said, you do not need to take notes. But I will just run you through what could be driving your organization. This is something for you to take away and decide, okay, what's important for our organization, and that should help shape both your corporate policy and your sustainable procurement policy. Is it your customer? Are you responding to customer expectations? You want to be seen as having a competitive advantage in the market over your peers or in your industry and your sector by giving them a more sustainable value added proposition to your clients. You want to have more innovative and digital solutions from your supply chain, so that could be your driver. Stakeholder expectations are important for all of us because stakeholders are both internal and external. You've got legislation around waste, single-use plastics, diversity, carbon, etc. Managing your risk. Of course, if you don't manage your risk, you're subconsciously bringing onto yourself a lot of issues in terms of, reputational damage, brand value damage, could be even financial loss. I'm just coming down and reading a few of them. Workers. These days, I find that staff and supply chain are making very, very conscious decisions about which organizations they want to work with and stick with. So being seen as ethical and sustainable in your operations and the way you deal with your staff as well, that helps you to attract, motivate, retain staff and your supply chain too. You want to have improved supplier relations, you want to optimize costs by minimizing waste. Whatever are your drivers, this will help shape your corporate policy and your sustainable procurement policy. The policy and the strategy itself needs to have leadership support, but this does not mean that they just need to sign a nice glossy document you put in a gold frame and hang it on the wall. That's just a dusty document. It may not be relevant today. It needs to be fresh all the time. Yes, write a nice policy, ensure it meets your organizational goals and targets. But once that's written, you need to implement the policy. So establishing who's going to be responsible, who's going to be accountable for that policy being implemented. Usually it's top management and heads of departments, so procurement, head of procurement, commercial, supply chain management, being accountable, and staff on the ground, commercial, supply chain management and procurement team members being responsible for getting embedded into the tender process and out to the supply chain. This is what the video was talking about, where it talks about right from the top, the corporate policy flowing right down into procurement through the organization capacity and down into the ground outwards to the supply chain. So top down out to the supply chain. Most often I've seen sustainability considerations. You do early market engagement, you talk to your supply chain, then ask questions in PQQ or SQ stage and ITT. and then you forget to embed it into the contract. What happens there, it's not contractually and legally binding on the supply chain to deliver, or you've written it into the contract, but then you don't have a contract and supply performance management team to ensure the supply chain is delivering on the promises. So you need to have that golden thread all the way through to ensure all the effort you've made upfront gets delivered on the ground, and you're capturing data with regards to that as well. You need to understand your supply chain. If you do not know who sits in your supply chain beyond tier one, like I said, you're subconsciously bringing on a lot of risk to yourself. But in the planning stage, you're going to write a sourcing strategy for whatever it is you're procuring. So whether it's goods, work, services, subcontract works, you will assess your risks and opportunities for sustainability to ask for alternate solutions, innovative solutions. Analyze all the costs, not just the purchase price, maintenance, spares, mobilization, demobilization, whatever that may be, end of life, waste disposal, circular economy considerations. What are your organization's needs in terms of sustainability? If they want to reduce carbon, they want 90% of waste diverted from landfill, that needs to feed into your tenders, and analyze the market. Wake up a dormant, sleepy supply chain. Yes, we've got pre-qualified suppliers that we work with day in and day out. Go into the market and check out what else is out there, who else is out there that can give me those sustainable solutions, and do some research that you can include in your tender as well. All of these will help form your sourcing strategy. So you've written a corporate policy, whether it's called a CSR policy or ESG policy, but you need to implement it. Like I said, you do not want a dusty document. It needs to be fresh and relevant. Does it validate my objectives? If we're talking about net zero 2035, is it validating that objective? Can I use that policy to now establish some SMART goals for procurement? So can that policy be translated so that it can go into procurement tenders and out to the supply chain? Have I actually communicated the policy to my staff, given them a bit of training on it? What does the jargon mean? Have I communicated it to my supply chain? Have I got endorsement and sponsorship from senior leadership team? Have they assigned clear roles, responsibilities, accountabilities? And of course, every 3 to 6 months, or at least once a year, assess and monitor your policy document. Is it still relevant today? Do I need to amend it, tweak it in line with latest trends, movements in the market, any new public procurement notices, any legislations coming out? So keep it a relevant and a fresh document. The enablers are the enablers in the procurement process. I usually very, very fondly call this Santa's little helpers. These are your 6 enablers that will help you to embed sustainability considerations in a very smooth manner into the procurement process. Governance is nothing other than all of your procurement templates. Early market engagement is quite an informal chat. Your first formal document would be your PQQ, pre-qualification, or SQ, supply questionnaire. Then you've got your ITT documents. I will tell you how to embed that on the further slides, but this is basically all of your procurement templates. Do not go to invent fresh templates for sustainability. If you've got questions to ask of the supply chain, embed your sustainability questions into your existing PQQ, into your existing ITT documents, taking away that admin and paper-heavy burden from yourself and your supply chain as well. Use your existing process, your existing tools and documents. People, the people piece is your staff on the ground. Do not assume that procurement professionals will understand all of the jargon. I could not grasp scope 3 for quite some time, and I teach in the school, but I'm also still a student of the school. So I keep doing a lot of e-learning myself. We are procurement professionals. We need training on what's the legislation on single-use plastics, what does inclusivity and diversity mean, what do the carbon considerations mean. So give your people that upskilling and training so that they can have those conversations when negotiating with the supply chain. They're having those knowledgeable discussions with the suppliers as well. Another very important part of the people piece is to make sustainability business as usual. Think about adding that in people's job descriptions and PDRs. but first train them and don't just slap them in the face and say, sustainability considerations is part of your remit, and they're looking at you like, I don't even know what that means. So if you're taking your supply chain on the journey, take the people in your team as well on the journey. So train your people, but to make it business as usual, add in some targets in their PDRs, make it part of job descriptions as well. So you've thought about all your sustainability considerations, you're asking of your supply chain and PQQ ITT process, you put in the contract, but if you're not going to manage that performance and monitor and measure any sustainability data, then the whole exercise has gone to waste. Think about data gathering, whether your supply performance happens every month or every quarter, however often is the frequency in your organization. Gather the data, analyze the trends. Is it good, bad, ugly? I've set a target for, let's say, demolition supplier to divert 90% of waste away from landfill. They're currently at 70%. What are the barriers? How can we mitigate the barriers? How can we take them along on the journey? The measurement piece is very important. Supplier performance measurement, contract management will help make this entire exercise successful. Otherwise, it's going to be a waste of time for you and your suppliers. Prioritize, because you won't have the time. Procurement professionals, supply chain managers, commercial managers, we are very, very, very busy in our day jobs. You cannot, and it's impossible to manage all of your supply chain. You do not need to manage all of your supply chain. Top 10, top 20 spend, where is your riskiest scope, your longer durations, your highest value subcontracts, bottlenecks, single source suppliers, strategic partners, key partners. Those are the ones you need to prioritize, where you should have asked the questions. You need to manage the behavior as well, but your riskiest scope, depending on whatever it is you're procuring, whether it's goods, works, or services. So a red, amber, green kind of rating, red being your highest risk, amber being you can sort of park it on the back burner, green, you probably have no leverage or influence, but no risk or opportunity lies, and take it a step further, blue being an opportunity where you can ask questions on the social and the economic sides of sustainability. Engagement is very important because you can't deliver all this by yourself. The procurement process, procurement department is a services function. We don't get a budget to procure something personally for a house or a garden. We're procuring something for a project or an organization. So it's a multi-stakeholder engagement kind of piece. Everyone who feeds into the process needs to think about sustainability considerations. So who are your most important stakeholders in the procurement process internally? The end user. You get your commercial team on board as well, health and safety, quality, sustainability teams, but most importantly, engage with your supply chain. As early as possible, if you do it in the process, it should not cost you an arm or a leg. Sustainable procurement does not cost you more. Bad procurement will. As early on in the process, start to give your supply chain a feel of what are your requirements, what's to come, so that they are also not shocked or unpleasantly surprised at the end. A grievance mechanism is nothing other than a whistleblowing policy. It's either most organizations have this policy for internally for their staff, but also externally for the supply chain. It's either an anonymous email address or like a phone number where the suppliers can call in or write in and talk about anything unethical or unsustainable that's happened in the procurement process. That's investigated, and the results of that are fed back to the supply chain. So these are your little helpers or your enablers to embed sustainability into the procurement process. Let's look at the process itself. It's PSM, plan, source, and manage. In the planning process of procurement, it's a challenge to need. Someone comes to you with a requisition and says, I want this, I want it urgently, or I needed it yesterday. Do you need it? Do you need it now? Do you need it in such less quantity? Can we bulk buy, consortium procurement? Can we get an alternative, more sustainable solution? Recycled aggregates, do we need primary aggregates? If it's rebar, do we need British steel? Can we source from Europe? Have those conversations. Like I said, it's all not down on procurement shoulders to think about those sustainability considerations alone. Do you need a Rolls Royce or a Bentley? Can we do it with a bicycle? I'm probably exaggerating at this point in time, but as you know, end users always want the Rolls Royce or the Bentley quality of everything. Whatever you're procuring, what are my risks and impacts? Is a product or a component of a product coming from an area in the world that's riddled with modern slavery and human rights issues? What are the opportunities? Can I source from a local supplier? Probably have a bit more SMEs on and local suppliers, diversity in my supply chain, risks and opportunity analysis, market, who else and what else is out there in terms of a sustainable solution, and all of that forms your sourcing strategy, your procurement strategy. At sourcing stage, now you are starting to firm up your scope. There are two elements here, the PQQ and your ITT. Here is when you embed your questions, and I'll talk you through that in a lot more detail, what you need to think about in your PQQ and ITT and how do you shape those questions. You finally award the contract. Now, in my world, procurement would plan and source. Commercial managers, QSs, manage the contract. So after plan and source, we would hand over to your commercial team. They would manage the contract. Remember, when you are handing over the contract after source to your commercial teams, hand over the balance scorecard and also the sustainability questions and considerations based on which you made the award, because you want that sustainability considerations to get managed as well. They need to be aware of that, your contract manager. So it's a transition phase. Contract reviews, they may happen in your world every month, every quarter, but to ensure data is captured and that performance for sustainability, not just only the technical scope, is also managed in the process. You're thinking about things like total cost of ownership, not just the purchase price. Like I said, probe the need. Do you need it? Can you do without it? Do we have an alternative solution, a more innovative practice that we can procure? Consider triple bottom line, social, economic, and environmental impacts. Always think the whole picture and the bigger picture. You won't always have the time to engage the market early, but where possible, especially for your highest value spend, do engage the market early. Ask them questions about where they are on their sustainability journey. What are they doing to reduce carbon emissions? How are they going to eliminate plastic and packaging from their process? So you're just giving them a feel of what's to come if they want to sit on your tender list. Engage with your stakeholders. You're generating ideas. Like I said, let them have a think about sustainability considerations as well. Do a bit of horizon scanning, know what else is out there. What are the current legislations that are affecting procurement? And increase the competition amongst your supply chain. Once you tell them about what your requirements are, it's up to them when they're bidding for your work to ensure that, of course, they give you the most competitive, sustainable, and technically sound bid, so fit for purpose. Specifications, so including these considerations in your spec, you're connecting to your golden thread. So you've got a corporate policy and strategy. You've then designed your procurement department level sustainable procurement strategy. Now it's feeding into your tenders. Think about, I'm asking a supplier a question. Please give me a copy of your waste management plan. Now, can this be answered by any bidder? If you're a large organization or an SME, large organizations will have a waste management plan in place. They will have a resource efficiency plan in place, and SME may not. Tweak your questions, whether it's a large supplier or an SME, make it appropriate to the organization size, the value, the contract duration. Keep it appropriate to the risk and opportunity. Don't over ask, demand the moon on a stick from your supply chain. If you think that sustainable solution is new, brand new to the market, not yet introduced, ensure in your pricing document you include another Word document or an Excel sheet tab to say, in case they need to price for that solution, they've got that option in there. If there are any responsible sourcing standards that you can guide the supply chain towards, do point them in that direction. But make sure whatever you're asking of the supply chain is measurable and reportable. It's not kept vague. And I'll come to that as well on the next slide, talking about SMART requirements. So you've got your organizational goals and targets, but you may be working on a project and you might have those ultimate client requirements as well. Make sure at this point you're passing that down in your tender. Any kind of thing like minimal levels of performance or any prescriptive spec at this point in time. These are just some examples of eco labels or product labels that you can use. depending on what it is you are buying. So FSC, timber, recyclability, carbon trust, fair trade, energy rating. If you're from the fashion industry, fabric industry, you've got BCI, organic cotton, ethical labor sourcing. So you can use eco labels, or like I said, you can use standards. So BES 6001, responsible sourcing of construction products, for rebar, for aggregates, whatever that may be. Understand what's contained within the labels and standards before just blindly applying them. You will get all of the blurb on the screen, so if you want to take notes, that's fine. If not, you will get a copy of the slides to come. This is very, very important. So thinking about the PQQ and the ITT stage, now you're embedding sustainability questions in here. PQQ and ITT, think about CCC. Capacity, capability, and commitment. In your PQQ stage, you want to check the capacity and capability of a supplier to deliver on your sustainability considerations and criteria. At this stage, you will ask for policies, carbon management policies, environmental management systems, all of the relevant ISO standards that may be relevant for environment, for example, or quality, health and safety. If they've got ISO 2400, they have assessed themselves, you probably want to see a copy of the score or how well they've done, whatever that may be. So copy of policy documents and no more than 2 sides of an A4 sheet or whatever is your requirement of a case study. How have they delivered these sustainability considerations for another client on a previous project? So not just policies, because everyone can draft a policy, but some kind of good news case studies of how they've done this in the past. So capacity and capability check happening there. Commitment at invitation to tender stage. So you want some contractually binding targets from them, because if they're successful on the tender, that is what you will write into their contract. So this is not vague promises here. What can they do for you if they are to be successful on this works package and a tender? So capacity, capability, at ITT stage, you want firm commitments now. Managing the contract, the most important part. Do not expect supply chain to deliver automatically on sustainability commitments, because contracts get measured, managed for the contractual clauses and the technical scope. The first thing to go out the window because of time constraints, resource constraints, is sustainability. You need to either upskill your end users to for them to understand what the sustainability considerations mean, or to have a sustainability coordinator who can engage with the supply chain for this. Holding your bidders to commitments they made when they were tendering. Now that they've won the work, they need to deliver on the promises. Your team internally needs to gather and analyze the data against the promises they have made. Collecting quantitative and qualitative information. You've probably set some KPIs in the contract as well. Having that performance management as a 360 dialogue rather than 180. Incentivizing the performance to do better. You're trying to foster those kind of strong collaborative and professional long-term relations with the supply chain. Last but not the least, so you have plan source to manage. You've awarded the contract. Supplier might be smashing the targets out the park, or they may not be doing so well. So document what's happening, what worked well, what didn't go so well, so that informs your future procurements on other projects or other works packages for your colleagues in the procurement team. Share that internally within your organization. So if the supplier has done really well, so a good news case study, or if it didn't go so well, lessons learned, what can be done differently next time, so that you learn from that too. Brilliant, you may have done all of this in the process. So what? So what's the outcome? What's the output of all of this? So if you remember one of the slides I threw up earlier in the day, it was this triple bottom line: people, planet, profit, and embedding that in a systematic manner in your process. By embedding it systematically into the process, what you get is nothing other than social value as an outcome. The input is sustainability considerations into procurement. The outcome is social value, and not just social value, but generated social value. Why do I say generated social value? Because you have been proactive in deciding what's important to you, embedding it, and then you're generating social value as an outcome. The definition of social value, again, it contains that triple bottom line theme. So the benefits to society from the delivery goods, work, services, whatever it is you're procuring, again, for environment, economic, and social. So that triple bottom line that's experienced by people and creates, that added value and a better quality of life for them. So sustainability into procurement, that's sustainable procurement, and you generating as an outcome social value. This is just an example. So this is PPN 06 that came out in 2020, the social value model. You've got 5 themes here. Most organizations use this within their balanced scorecard, COVID-19 recovery, helping communities to manage and recover from the impact of COVID-19, where there's economic inequality, increasing supply chain resilience, capacity. Effective stewardship of the environmental comes under your environmental aspects of fighting climate change. You've got health and well-being, equal opportunity, like I said, not just within the workforce, but also within your supply chain as well. So just as an example, this is one of the social value models that you can follow within your procurement process. You do not need to follow all 5 themes, depending on what it is you're procuring, the nature of your organization or project. You can just pick and choose from these as well. Just a little bit of guidance from the buyer side and for the suppliers as well. Buyers embed social value and sustainability right throughout the project. Like I said, the earlier on you do it, the better it is for you in terms of added value. Don't ask for everything. Don't ask for the moon on a stick. What's the value of the contract? What's the scope of the contract? What's the duration? What's the size of my supply chain organization? Tweak it and make it relevant. Everyone in the procurement process is responsible and accountable. It's not all on your shoulders to think about these sustainability considerations. Think about what you are asking at tender stage. Keep your questions smart. Specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound. Don't forget to write it into the contract and then monitor the supplier's performance after that. Ask for data to back it up, especially for audit purposes. And when things go right or wrong, share positive outcomes and lessons learned. Suppliers, if there are any supply chain organizations on the call, when you are answering to a bid, set out clear, measurable targets of what it is that you are offering. Don't leave it vague and open-ended as well. There was an SME organization on a previous webinar, and they asked me, Mel, how can I demonstrate added social value when I know on that tender list there are a lot of bigger players in the market? I may not be considered in the process. I'm still a newbie or in this journey. Wherever you are on the journey, demonstrate that you are coming along in the sustainability journey. You have just looked at your drivers. You're just shaping your corporate social responsibility policy. You're working towards reducing waste, working towards more community engagement investment. Just write that very clearly and highlight that in your bid answer so that they know that, yes, you are coming along on the journey. No one's perfect. We're not all yet 100% there. Focus on quality, not quantity. Be realistic in what it is you can achieve. Again, if they are not asking for a moon on a stick, you also please do not go and promise the moon on a stick. Keep it sensible, keep it realistic, and be very, very specific in what it is you can offer in this point in time as a sustainable alternative solution in your bid. 12:45. So in summary, we talked about the triple bottom line. Please always consider the whole picture, the bigger picture. Yes, environmental aspect may be important for some it may be social, for some it may be economic. Keep that as your main focus, but do not ignore the other 2 circles aspects as well. Follow the golden thread. What is my organizational level policy strategy? Does that shape my procurement policy? Is that flowing into my tender process? Is it going out to my supply chain? So golden, nice, neat golden thread. We define sustainable procurement as being positive over the entire life cycle, triple bottom line, being proactive, not reacting in case something goes wrong on site. Make it business as usual. It's smart procurement. It should not cost you an arm and a leg. And most importantly, prioritize. We are always strapped for time and resource. You will not be able to manage all of your supply chain. you probably do not need to manage all of your supply chain. A few relevant resources. When you get the slide deck, all of these links are clickable, so you will have access to these sites, websites. ISO 20400.org helps you to assess the maturity of your organization on your sustainability journey. When you click on it, it takes you to a self-assessment tool. It's got multi-choice questions. You can answer that and get a score for your organization. So that's one resource. We've got another, so this is the link to the school, which takes you to further e-learning. You've got things like heat mapping, but you've also got web links to like white papers and the Sustainable Supply Chain Diagnostic tool as well. So a few resources to look at here. This screen is a bit misleading because we don't have 4, but we've got 5 learning pathways for sustainable procurement, right from level 1 to level 5. We keep refreshing them in case some of the resources are outdated. So if you want to further upskill yourself or team members, do join some of our learning pathways. The link down below should take you to the screen for pathways in the school. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen because we are almost at the end of today's session, and just give me a few seconds. What I will do is, before I start taking questions, I will put the feedback form link in the chat box. If you can give us your feedback for today, whilst I start answering questions, that will be really, really helpful. So feedback form link is in the chat box. If you please click on the feedback form link, give us your feedback from today's Lunch and Learn session. That will be great. And I'm going to take questions. What can procurement professionals do to make the procurement process? What can procurement professionals do to make the process more accessible to SMEs? Okay. What can procurement professionals do to make the procurement process more accessible to SMEs? I'll give you a very important example here. So having worked on a very large infrastructure project, because the value of the work packages is so high, we usually tend to go towards the larger players in the market, and that is but natural for procurement managers. What we did is we consciously engaged with the local borough in which that project was based. We looked at some of the work packages on the procurement or the tender schedule, and we took a view on what could be broken down into smaller works packages. Where was it feasible for us to let out that scope, maybe to local suppliers or to the SMEs, thereby giving a chance to the local suppliers and the SMEs. So look at your procurement schedule, any works packages on there, maybe catering, maybe cleaning, could be even vegetation clearance. Demolition, yes, we did have more M's from the SME, so more medium players in the market as well. So just looking at the works packages and saying, okay, this is a low risk scope or a smaller scope, can I break it down further and let it out to SMEs or the local suppliers? So that is something that you can do as well. So that question has been answered. I've got a question, but okay, it's half. Okay, is there a resource that summarizes the risks associated with different activities or products? So we do have different resources in the school. We've got some for plant and materials and what are the considerations within that. This also sits within the performance through procurement element of the school as well. So we've got a program delivering procurement workshops, but we also talk about sustainability elements within there. So plant, material, and subcontract procurement, and we do give a lot of live examples over there. We've also got modules around sustainability on site for site agents, site managers as well, and you'll find elements within there as well. So let me just, hopefully I have answered that as well. Good question. What is circular procurement? I will probably have to Google that and come back to you. Are there any other questions? Unless you were asking about circular economy. Are there any other questions for us today? For anyone who doesn't have a question, if you can go to the feedback form link, I have put it in the chat. Please do give us your feedback. One thing I will say is that in the new financial year, that is come April, we're going to be doing a host of sessions, which will be workshops and not just webinars. The sustainable procurement workshops are longer sessions, so they are for about 2.5 to 3 hours. They're more interactive in nature as opposed to what we're using now, which is the webinar type of platform of Zoom. In that, you will be able to chat to me. We've got about anywhere between 15 to 20 people on the workshop for 3 hours with a lot more interaction and a lot more live case studies and exercises as well. So do check out the events page of the school if you want to attend a workshop as well. I'm going to give it a few seconds or a minute more if there are any other questions, and there is one out here. Are there tools already out there to manage sustainability targets? There absolutely are, once the contract has been started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a note to send you a link to the sustainability tools. We have an in-house tool ourselves, so I can send you the link to our tool. But what I will also do is I will send you the email address for my colleague, and her name is Vaishali. Vaishali is the lead consultant on social value. Vaishali is doing an interesting piece of work where she's comparing all of the sustainability measuring and managing tools out there from an agnostic point of view. What are the pros and cons? What are the features? So she can get back to you as well, and probably you can get involved in the piece of work. So I will just make a note to send you the link to our tool and the email address of Vaishali. Hopefully I've answered that question. Is there a central list of supply chain sustainability school members? So Sophie, my colleague who's on the call today, you can probably answer that question. Is there a central list of supply chain sustainability school members? That question's getting answered. One more. So when we're talking about sustainable procurement, is this focusing on the operations of our supplier or their specific product offering material? It'll be both. It'll be both. So this, Gemma, is a very, very interesting question. So there's a distinction between sustainable supplier and sustainable supply. So this is quite an interesting and important one. A sustainable supplier is one who is quite sustainable in-house. So they've got a green living roof and green living walls for their own office buildings, all of their papers recycled, they're managing the waste in-house. What they are doing for themselves, their staff, and their organization. Sustainable supplier. This sustainable supplier has bid for work on your project, your organization. Are they being sustainable in what they're supplying to you? If yes, that is sustainable supply. If not, that is not. So you can be a very sustainable supplier, but if what you're giving to me in the bid is unethical or unsustainable, that doesn't make sense to me. So sustainable supplier and sustainable supply. Most organizations are concerned with sustainable supply. I have let a bid out for demolition or rebar or aggregates. Is it ethically sourced? Is it sustainably sourced? We don't really care about, other than your policies, are you a sustainable supplier? But I've seen a lot of organizations, especially in the FM and the home sector, facilities management and homes, thinking also about, I'm not just bothered about what you put in the bid, but are you sustainable in-house as well? Sustainable supplier and sustainable supply. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay, done. How difficult it is to attain ISO standards. If you're talking about ISO 2400, it's not something to attain. Like I said, it's a framework or a guidance standard. You get your organization evaluated against the standard. You get a score of 0 to 5. A first-time assessment score for organizations is usually somewhere between 2 and 3, which is like you're starting out on the journey. Then we give you a whole host of recommendations, how long it will take you to implement the recommendations, what are the time considerations. And then after a couple of years, organizations are towards the 3.8 to the 4 mark. So that hopefully answers your question. How can companies get suppliers to regularly collect and publish employee diversity data? Probably make it a KPI in the contract as well. But what I will do is I can also send you the name of the colleague, because we've got a new diversity measuring and monitoring tool as well. Speak to your supplier about it, make it a contractual KPI for them to regularly, so whatever regularly is defined as in your world, monthly, quarterly, or maybe half yearly, if it's a contractual KPI or you've had it as part of, a discussion in supply relationship management, then they should be able to regularly publish and give you, keeping in mind GDPR considerations, that employee diversity data as well. Just conscious of time, we've got 4 minutes to trying to answer as many questions. Are there any certificates that we need to question when choosing a subcontractor? You're talking about construction lines. You're probably talking about the due diligence and the PQQP. So I know the rail sector has the CAS, Common Assessment Standard, which is basically 3 website PQQs: Construction Line Gold, Achilles Building Confidence, and CHAS Premium. These do have sustainability elements in there. If it does not satisfy your project or your organization's requirements, you can ask to see their CSR policies. You can even do audits for things like modern slavery or waste management. So hopefully that answers your question too. 2 same questions of Amber, sorry, from you. What are the main things you should be including about sustainable procurement in your bids? So first of all, what are your considerations? So what's important to you? Whether it's waste, whether it's carbon, whether you want more community engagement and investment, whether you want transparency down the tiers in your supply chain. Those are the relevant questions that you will ask in your, before the bid, your PQQ stage, before the PQQ stage in the early market engagement conversations as well. Keep it light and watered down. Informal chats at early market engagement, PQQ, ask for policy type questions on whatever is important to you and some case studies of how they've delivered that with previous clients. And then hard-hitting, commitment-based, quantitative and qualitative questions at the ITT stage. So main things for you would be different from what are the main things to me, but it's usually the environmental considerations and social considerations that people include in the bids. And hopefully that answers your question. We've got 2 minutes more here. So hopefully everyone has filled in the feedback form, and this is the last question. Oh wow, we've got some more questions here. What are the measures that you can use as a procurer? What are the measures that procurers can use to show suppliers? What are the measures that procurers can use to show suppliers have fair wage practices, like paying a living wage? So you can probably ask for any policy documents or any evidence of that, like paying a real living wage or London living wage, whatever is applicable to the geographical location that you are in. But also these clauses around real living wage, fair living wage, I've seen them written into NEC3 and NEC4 contracts as well. So at the end of it, when the contract's awarded, you can probably ask for documentary evidence on that as well. Roxy, hopefully that answers your question. So write it into the contract, but discuss it very early on in your process. I'm going to take the last question, and then I am going to finish this session for today. Please, everyone, fill in the feedback form. Okay. With continuously increasing costs and squeezed margins in supply chains, with retail customers wanting the most value for money products, how is that sustainability agenda driven in the best way for the customer benefit? You know what? And we talk about value for money. Value for money does not always mean the cheapest price or the lowest price. It could be the added value benefit. What it is that you can offer to your customer over and above the cost or the price of what it is that they are buying. So if you're thinking about things like social value, it does not cost you an arm or a leg, but it will not be that cheapest solution. Think about something as simple as a halogen bulb versus an LED bulb. Halogen bulbs are cheaper, but yes, they are less energy efficient, and LED will last you longer. It bites your pocket initially at the beginning, but at the end, it lasts you a lot more longer. So I'm giving you a very simple solution here. And added value will be over and above the product, what it is that you can show in a tangible manner as added value that you're giving to your supplier. It won't always be the cheapest price. Helen, hopefully that answers your question. Right, I am going to have to stop the session because it's 1300 hours, that's 1 o'clock. Tanya, I'm sorry, I was not able to answer your question about circular procurement. I'm not sure if it was about circular economy, but I will send out links to the employee diversity tool, the sustainability tool as well. My colleague Vaishali, the lead for social value, she is doing an agnostic view on all the sustainability tools in the market so that you don't have to rack your brains to think which is the best one for us. Thank you to everyone who has attended this session. Have a good day ahead. Enjoy your lunch and hope to see you on further sessions as well. Take care. Goodbye.